Are we turning this on?
I know,
That's
right?
the right response.
That is the right response. He's so sweet, though. He's like
Mic check. There we go.
Akita and he's a golden retriever in an Akita's body.
Do
Do we need the mic? Can everyone hear us okay?
I think you need it.
we need it? Okay, all right. I kind of like hollering, but I understand. Do you have any pets?
I do. I have a schnauzer.
Okay, well, we can come back to the pet talk. I'm supposed to introduce everyone. We've just been having too much fun. Okay, hi, and thank you all for being here today. I'm Kat Akery. I'm one of the editors of Book Page. Actually, if you see a little book page around, make sure you grab one. It's just a wonderful little magazine full of books, so you might like it. This panel, you may have noticed, was supposed to include Destiny Birdsong. She was unable to join us today, but I did just want to give a quick shout out to Nobody's Magic, which you should also check out, along with the two books that we're going to be talking about for the next hour. It's wonderful. They are wonderful. Okay, before we get started, I just want to say, remind everyone how lucky we are that this event is free. The Southern Festival of Books continues to be free, thanks to the many sources, but certainly including the help of individual donations. So we encourage you to donate at whatever level is comfortable to you, and you can do so at the Humanities Headquarters on the website, humtn.org, or now via Venmo at humtn, like humtn. Okay. All right, let's get started. So I'm gonna introduce our two authors. They're gonna share a little bit about their books. They're gonna read a little excerpt perhaps, and then I'm gonna have a little conversation with them, and around 4 o'clock I'll open it up for questions from all of you, and we have a friend running around with a microphone, so we'll be able to hear you, no problem. Okay, first, LaToya Watkins. LaToya Watkins comes to us from Texas, and her debut novel is Perish. I'm gonna hold that up, this gorgeous cover so you can see it. It's published by Tiny Reparations Books. She has a PhD from the University of Texas at Dallas, and her writing has appeared in a number of journals, including A Public Space, Kenyon Review, the Pushcart Prize Anthology, and elsewhere. She has had fellowships at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference and the MacDowell Colony, among others. Welcome, thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about Perish, your debut novel, and sharing a little bit from the book.
Perish, okay, I just wanted to make sure that this was on. Perish is a book about family. In this book, a family's coming together because their matriarch is on her deathbed, and they're kind of estranged. So at this reunion, a lot of things are unearthed, and secrets are revealed, and they have to decide whether or not they are going to work through those things as a family or kind of dissolve and part ways. The book is told in 5 perspectives. So the first chapter of the book is it takes place, it's set in 1955 in an outhouse where the matriarch, who we find in the present, or in 2018, on her deathbed. But she's in this outhouse, and she has tried to terminate a pregnancy, an unwanted pregnancy, and it has failed, so she has resolved to go forward. She feels like she hears the voice of God, who tells her to bear it or perish, and she decides to bear it. So the part that I'm going to read from is from her granddaughter, who has just found out that she is dying, and she's just kind of reeling from that news. So I'll start there. Her granddaughter's name is January. She goes by Jan, and this is Jan. Grandma die. I won't never find out where she keep that money. If she live, I probably won't find out either. She ain't been herself in a long time, and I'm coming to realize she might never get back to being herself. I wonder what that means to me and my kids, to my mama, who I got in mind to take to Dallas with me. My mama ain't never been the kind of mama I am to my kids, but that don't make her any less than what God done made her to me. Mama, my son called me from his bedroom, and it made me pause with my scrubbing and let out a weak, huh? Is Jazera done yet? He asked. And it get on my nerves that he rushing, because I know he just want to play that video game. When we pulled up after I got my groceries from the store, I told him, don't ask me to play no game till you done your homework, ate, and got your bath. Now he rushing, and I want to go in there and get on him. But I'm going to ignore him because he done rushed through everything to get to that game. Rushed through his homework, rushed through his chores, rushed through dinner. Everything. Everything ain't about having fun. I want him to know you can't run all over others rushing to where you want to be. He gonna consider others. Mama, Jazera called. Mama, tell Javon to leave me alone. And it don't sink in with me at first. I keep scrubbing the cup I'm working on. Start to open my mouth and tell Javon I'm gonna beat his butt. And then I remember she in the tub. He ain't supposed to be nowhere near there. Everything go quiet for me, like my ears closed up and I done gone deaf. I drop the cup in the sink and water splash on me and on the floor, but I don't care. I want my heart to be still, because not in my house, not never in my house. I almost slip on the spilled water trying to make my way to the bathroom, where I can see the back of Javon's head and his orange t-shirt moving like he doing a dance. When I come close, the sound come back to me, and I can hear him. He's singing, ah-ha, ah-ha, she ain't coming, cry, baby. When I get close enough, I slap his back with my open palm so hard he fly forward and trip on the rug. His head barely missed the side of the tub, but I ain't worried about that. His scared eyes don't move me or make me softer. I bend over him and pull him up by his shirt. What you doing in here? I scream in his face. What you do to her? I ask. I can feel his body trembling under the weight of my grasp. I can feel my own body trembling. I don't know what's going on. Javon and Jazera both know the rules. I ain't never put them in the bathtub together. I don't care that it's just a few years between them. They ain't never allowed in the bathroom when the other there. They ain't never allowed to see each other's nakedness. He stutter, but don't say nothing else. So I look over at my daughter, who's sitting in the tub with her black Barbie doll suspended in midair. Her eyes wide with fear, and it make me want to hurt the child under my hand. What did you do? I say, grabbing his shoulders between my hands and trying to shake the truth out of him. He was throwing toys in here, Mama, Jazera say so loud she's shouting at me and about to cry at the same time. Mama, don't kill Javon. He was just playing. Don't kill my brother. And I look at her and how scared she is. And I look at my boy and how scared he is. And it make me sick to my stomach. Oh, I say, releasing my grip on his shirt. Oh, I thought, and I can't say it.
Thank you. All right, Dolan Perkins-Valdez comes to us from Washington, D.C., and is the best-selling author of Wench, Balm, and now Take My Hand, published by Berkeley. She was a finalist for 2 NAACP Image Awards and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for Fiction. She was also awarded the first Novelist Award by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. She is the current chair of the board of the Penn Faulkner Foundation, as well as an associate professor in the literature department at American University. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Kat.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about your novel and maybe reading a little bit from it?
Well, thank you, LaToya, for reading that passage. I am originally from Memphis, even though I live in D.C. now, so it's good to be back in my home state. My book is set in 1973 Montgomery, Alabama, and it is loosely based on the real-life story of the Rolfe sisters, who were 2 little black girls who had something really tragic happen to them by a federally funded family planning clinic. They had been put on birth control in real life, 12 and 14 years old. In my book, India and Erica are put on birth control at 11 and 13 years old. And the book is told from the perspective of the nurse who worked at the clinic, who is charged with giving the girls Depo-Provera, the long-acting contraceptive that they're put on. Sybil is a recent graduate of nursing school. This is her first job ever. And when something really tragic happens to the girls at the clinic, she becomes determined to seek justice for them. So, can I borrow that book over there?
Yes.
I don't have to read from my phone.
Yes.
It'll be better. Okay. So I'm going to read from the passage when she first meets the girls. She has to go on a home visit. Okay. When I drove up, at first I assumed that the Williams sisters lived in the neat brick Rambler with the 2 pickup trucks parked out front. A thick cloud of dust swirled around my mama's little car, and when it cleared, I spied 2 little white boys standing on the house porch. I rolled my window all the way down, hoping they'd see my uniform. "I'm looking for the Williams family." I was positive I had read the number on the mailbox correctly. One of them pointed behind the house, and I understood. I wound the car around the pickups, following the scant outline of tire tracks. The Pinto pushed through the ruts, bouncing so hard I was afraid I'd hit my head on the roof. I prayed I wouldn't get stuck. The last thing I wanted was to have to walk back down to that house and ask those boys to go get their daddy. Fortunately, it hadn't rained in a while and the ground was dry. The trees cleared and the land swelled up into a hill. At the top sat a cabin. The car sputtered, but I tapped the gas pedal and somehow made it to the top. Everything leveled out and the tire tracks disappeared in the brush. Off to my left, I could see a wide field of green stalks. I didn't know a thing about farming, but anybody with eyes could tell that was wheat growing out there. Cows grazed in a lot beside the barn. A lone chicken peeked at me as it stepped through knee-high grass. Up close, the structure was more of a wooden shanty than a cabin, and it looked tired, as though a wind had blown it askew and it hadn't had the energy to right itself. A skinny black dog scratched his back in the dirt. In the rearview mirror, I could see my lips were dry. I licked them, and my cracked bottom lip scratched my tongue. I got out of the car and stepped into a huddle of gnats. The air smelled of burning wood. Something told me these girls couldn't be in school. If they were, they didn't go every day. They should have been expecting me, but they didn't have a phone, and I wasn't even confident they knew about our appointment. They had initially been assigned another nurse who had quit the clinic the month before. I was there to pick up where she left off. A girl wearing grubby pants and an orange t-shirt shaded her eyes with a hand. The backlight of the sun darkened her face. "How you doing? I'm Sybil Townsend from the Family Planning Clinic." It didn't make sense for us to be out here in our uniforms, but Miss Seeger insisted. It was March chilly, and I had left my sweater in the car. I stepped up closer. Someone had tried to braid the girl's hair, but the roots were so matted with dirt that only the ends of the hair could be plaited. I clutched the file under my arm and tried to remember what I'd read. "Are you India?" The dog rubbed against my leg, and I fought an urge to push the animal off. It saddled away. I looked down, and sure enough, it had left a brown mark on my white pantyhose. "She don't talk." I jumped. I hadn't seen the other girl standing inside the screen door. I remembered the contents of the file now. The younger sister was mute. I had skimmed that detail, but it came to me now. "Oh, okay, I'm Sybil Townsend. I'm the nurse sent to give y'all shots today." "What happened to the other one?" "I don't know," I stuttered. The nurse's leave-taking baffled me, too. Maybe the demands of the job had been too much. Maybe she'd found something that paid more. Being out here on this farm wasn't anybody's idea of a good time. Even so, there weren't government jobs just laying around waiting to be picked up. "Is your daddy home?" "No, ma'am." I blinked as I pieced together their story in my head. Mace Williams, father, 33. Milked cows, tilled the land, did whatever the white man told him to do in exchange for this shanty and a pittance of money. Constance Williams, mother, deceased. Patricia Williams, grandmother, 62. In the distance, the inky outline of grazing cows flickered in the light. Your grandmama here? Grandma, the nurse here. I tried to smile, but I wasn't sure if my expression passed for polite. I didn't know whether I should ask to come inside or if I should wait for the grandmother to come out. The older sister settled it. I remembered now that her name was Erica. You can come in if you want. She opened the door for me, the screen pulled away from the edge of the wooden frame, not much protection against the flies. It creaked on its hinges. I'm not sure if I said this before, but walking into that house changed my life. And yes, it changed theirs too. I walked right up in there with my file and bag of medicine ready to save somebody. Little old me, 5'5" and know-it-all.
That's one of my favorite lines. That was great. Thank you. Thank you both so much. So when we were backstage, LaToya, you were talking about coming from a background of short fiction and before writing this novel, not necessarily knowing what it would be like to spend so much time with a work for so long, one piece of fiction for so long. So I want to know from each of you, at what point did you know, I want to know about the seed from which it grew. At what point did you know that you had something that you wanted to stick with for so long? For you, what point did you know that, okay, yes, I'm on my way, I've got a novel? And for you, at what point in your research into this true court case did you know, okay, now we've got a story? Whoever wants to start.
Parrish started out, it was a short story. That it was the first story that I ever wrote and workshopped, and it was before I knew anything about craft or writing or audience. So in a way, for me, it was very pure. I didn't place any of the things that I place on my writing now. Like, I wonder if, this will appeal to that person, or if I should actually say this thing. It was raw. It was a short story. I think the title of it was Pitiful Laughter. So it was just a fraction of this. But when I went back and looked over all of the things that I had written years later, it was the one story that scared me, because I knew that there was more there. And that was the one that I needed to go back to, because it was also like the hardest story that I ever wrote. I think it was the subject matter, the research that I was doing. It was the stuff that, during that time, gave me nightmares, and I needed to go back in there and explore that and find peace with some of that stuff. So that's how I knew that story was the one that needed to be a novel.
Couldn't shake it.
Was that story published?
It wasn't.
Okay, I was going to say it would be real interesting to read the story and then see how that becomes a novel.
It was like one perspective. There was only one character from here. So I tried to cheat it before it actually became the novel that I think my first draft, the novel draft, was like 19 narrators, because I didn't want to go back and grow with the characters or the narrators. So I tried to cheat it, but I had to go in and spend some time with all of them.
That's fascinating. So for me, I never know what's going to be a book, because like you just said, it takes a long time to write a book, and you really have to have a real obsession with whatever it is you're writing about. And I have a lot of curiosity about the world, and so I'm always discovering new things. And people will come up to me and say, I have a book idea for you, right? And so, there are so many things you can write about. So it's a good question to ask, what is the thing that you say, okay, this is how I'm going to spend the next, for me, 7 years of my life, But with this story, I would say there were like 2 or 3 things that pushed me to write about it. One is I was surprised that I hadn't learned about it in school because it was such a big deal at the time. It was in every major newspaper. It was on NBC News. It was in Time Magazine. It was in Ebony and Jet, you know. And I hadn't learned about it in school, and a lot of people I asked didn't know about it. And then the second thing, I would say there were so many sources there for me to mine. I mean, there's the people are still alive, you know, so I went to Montgomery and I interviewed people, and that was a real treasure and source of information. And then I would say the third thing was just feeling that it was a story that needed to be told. It was, to me, I was just surprised nobody had written the book. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna write that book, so.
To be frank, both of your books can be hard to read sometimes. They go right for your heart. They're harrowing, they're heartbreaking, they're, as much as sometimes they're hard to read, I imagine at some points they were very hard to write. I have to assume. And I just would love to know what kept you going with these stories when it got hard?
Well, you know, I feel like we read at different points in our lives for different reasons, right? Like, I know that romance novels are making a big comeback right now, right? Because during COVID, people wanted romance. They wanted to feel good, and I'm all for it, right? My good friend Emily Henry is tearing it up right now. One time she had like 5 books on the New York Times bestseller list at the same time, you know. She's amazing. So I think there's that moment. Sometimes, you know, maybe you want to read a thriller. You want something that's going to be a turn pager that's going to get you through that international flight. I just did that with S.A. Cosby books, Razorblade Tears, on my flight to London. I couldn't put that book down, and I read it on the flight. It was great. I didn't even have to watch a movie. And then you read a book, maybe sort of like ours, that really causes you to think about some things. And I think those books are important too, right? Like, it's important sometimes for us to allow literature to be transformative in the deepest of ways. And that's sort of how I feel about these books. But in terms of like what kept me going, I don't experience it the same way that a reader does. Like, when I'm writing, I'm not, if it were too emotionally difficult for me to write, I probably wouldn't write it. You know what I mean? And there are some things that are, like, I can't write, there's certain things I cannot write about, like the period after the Civil War, what they call the nadir of African American experience, that time when men were being lynched. I can't write about that. That's really painful. But when I do enter the project, I enter it because I think I can do it. I think I can handle it, and typically I'm just trying to get it done. And then afterwards I'm like, okay. And then sometimes I'll like experience it with the reader when y'all are reading it and saying it's hard, like, you know, then I'm like, I know it's hard. Like, I get that, but when I'm writing, I don't experience it in the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I love that you said that, because I think that is, it's true. Like, for me, the research, the people that I interviewed, some of the archives that I went through were a lot harder than the actual writing. Like I said before, like actually going back and kind of dealing with some of the things that were in the research is where I found peace. And it became kind of like a puzzle, trying to put that together in a way that I know it's sometimes tough, but it's digestible for a reader. And I do like that. Like, sometimes we're reading for different reasons, right? In different places. There's like a place for everything. Sometimes I do want a beach read. Sometimes I do want to escape, but sometimes I want to know about things that I didn't know or that I don't know. And I didn't get to say this after your reading, but That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
That was, it was beautiful. Thank you. It was beautiful, those descriptions and just the setting of that scene, her driving up that hill like that, beautiful. But I think that these are things that I agree that I don't think I would write them if I didn't think that I could handle them. Before the writing, I had some of the people, I was actually researching, I was in graduate school, so I was trying to find my way through it, and I thought that first I thought I was gonna be looking at religion, and then I thought I was gonna be looking at cults. So I'd been talking to a lot of people who I had kind of a connection to someone who had a connection to people who had escaped some West Texas cults. And the leader that they reported was, that they talked about, was very intriguing to me. Like one of my first published stories was about him, but their stories gave me nightmares. And then some of the research that I did around that gave me nightmares. And then I started going off on these tangents and finding the communities that they came from. And that was very disturbing, like what some of the records said and what they didn't say, and what some of the people who were still living to talk to me said and what they didn't say. So I needed to find a way to kind of write those that gave me peace about those situations. So I think that it was like the research was harder than the writing is the only way that I can kind of put that.
That makes a lot of sense. Similar to you saying, I knew someone who knew someone who, someone once told me that Toni Morrison told them that you should, right? Everyone's got one, especially with Toni Morrison, one. Yeah, she said to this person, you should be writing a half a heartbeat ahead of the reader, so that everything that the reader is reading should feel inevitable to a certain extent, but also still kind of surprising. You know, they're always just kind of being pulled along to something that it must be this way. And I think about certainly, you know, you just, both of your books are so beautifully written, and one of the ways that a reader can be drawn through that inevitability when a story, you know, wades into darkness is through language. It can, you know, build a rhythm, draw a reader in along with you. And I don't really have a question about that, but that's what your books made me both of your books made me think about that, as far as how a reader might enter into a dark space with you. And kind of on that same note, you know, both of your books are working with very different perspectives, different point of views. We've got a civil and a very close point of view, but also we've got her in, is it present day? Is it, yeah, it's present, well, yes, present-ish. What is present? Present-ish, and she's looking back on her experiences kind of with some judgment of her own actions, but just, you know, with certainly with distance. And then also we've got your story, which has multiple perspectives, some, you know, moving through memory, moving through time. And I just, it seems like you are both very conscious of books as a portal into historical stories. And any historical fiction written now is going to be shaped by, you know, the author's present, the present that the reader is in. It's all inextricably tied. So I guess I just wanted to know, you know, how is your present shaping your writing of these books moving through time? I think it's your turn to go first.
Oh, wow. That's, there's so much going on in the present, and so much not going on at the same time, that I think I find myself in the past a lot, like reading, looking back in different historical eras, even in different places. Like I found myself looking in different countries in Africa, just because I am a huge like fan of Nollywood or African cinema, and there are a lot of cultural things in there that I'm interested in. So I think that I spend time doing that definitely informs like the history that I'm creating or what goes into my work. I'm like reading in this particular book, there was a whole thread in here that when I first, like this is when I really first found Nollywood, when I started writing this, and there was a whole thread in there, and it was really tangential, and I didn't want to let it go, but it was like a Nollywood thread. Like I had a character who was a best friend to one of these main characters, and she was Nigerian, and her husband was like a filmmaker. And it just had nothing to do with the storyline, but I wanted to make it fit because this is something that has become very important to me, like learning how to make jollof rice or egusi soup. Like these things have become important, but that's just one of the things that I'm doing. Like I was saying earlier, I've become a dog person, like out of the blue. So I spend a lot of time writing about these moments with this dog and this shift from like kind of looking at my pets like, oh my gosh, I can't, is this it? Am I finally rid of this pet? To where like, oh, I can't imagine being rid of this pet. So like those are things that I note, those kind of, and then of course we have these big cultural and political shifts that are always happening, and I think that those find their way into our personal histories, which find their way into our work. And I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of what I thought of.
I don't know if I'm going to answer it either, but I'm just going to say some stuff. How's that?
That's what I did. That's what I did.
Because that was a big question. But I will say, I don't think of history and the present as being discrete categories. I think of them as the same. And I, used the dual timeline in this novel. This is the first dual timeline novel I've written. But when the dual timeline form began to become popular in historical fiction, for those of you who are historical fiction writers, you know this is sort of a trend right now. I remember hearing about it and I said, we always had dual timeline. Why are they talking this like it's something new? And, because there's always been like books that moved through time in different ways. But then I realized that what they were doing in the historical fiction world was using these contemporary moments as a lens through which to view the historical moment and then the intersection eventually, et cetera. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And so I tried it with this book, right? Because it really, to me, suits my view on like events. Like if you think that what we are going through right now at this moment in time is new, then you don't know your history, right? Like we have been here before. You know, the old people used to say, that girl been here before. When you had like an old spirit, y'all heard her like a grandmother say? My mother says that about my 8-year-old. She's like, that girl been here before. And I believe in that kind of thing. I believe that like there are people who have these old spirits, and maybe even we could be talking about some kind of, I don't know, I'm not gonna go too deep on that. But my point is that I really love historical fiction because I think it is a window into the present. And it helps me to understand what's going on right now, to know history. So it really is very frustrating to me to see people on Twitter and stuff talking about stuff, and they don't know the history. They think this is something new, and it's not. And so if you knew the history, you would better understand how these are just cycles. you know, but yeah, I don't know if that answers the question
I don't
at
care.
all.
It was a
Kat.
great answer. I loved it.
That was a great
I loved
answer.
it. Who cares what my question was? Okay, I'll ask a smaller question, and because I love both of your titles. So if you wouldn't mind telling the audience a little bit about why you titled your book what you did. I think it's your turn.
Yeah,
Steve,
I was wondering, I was going to ask LaToya this question. I didn't title my book, so my answer is quick. My publicist titled my book. I had a title they didn't like. And what was it? It was called If This Is Peace. Y'all like that? No. They hated it. So I was fine. It's okay. I'm not very good at titling. Are you good at titling?
I'm horrible at titling. Like, I'm horrible. This didn't even have a title until I think it sold. And I was reading it one last time, and I was like, let me find the title, because it was a working title, actually. It was Untitled. And I was like, let me find a title. And I wanted to just find a line, like a 3-worder in there. And I sent it to a friend. I sent it to Sandaria. We were talking about
a mutual
her
friend.
and she usually has a really good knack for saying, "Oh, that's your title right there." And she said, I think she said "Bear it or perish." And this is gonna sound, but your book Winch was on my desk at the time. And
One word title.
and I was like, I want one word.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was like, I'm just gonna try it with one word. They will let me know. Like, editors are always changing my titles, and I'm okay with it because I know I'm not good at it. But it made it all the way through, and they were okay with it. So
It is a great title. I like it.
Thank you. I can't take credit for it.
Okay, let's open it up to some audience questions, or I can keep jabbering, but we got one.
We have a microphone
Hold
coming.
on, we want to hear you.
Thank you. So in Take My Hand, how do past acts like these that happened to Erica and her sister impact how people of color deal with the medical part, medical doctors?
Well, it's funny you asked that.
Uh-oh.
Because let me see, what's today, Friday? Wednesday night, I did an event it started with an attending from UVA Medical School, University of Virginia in Charlottesville, reaching out to me and saying, I have 8 residents, and I'm asking my residents to read your book. And can you Zoom with us? And I said, sure. And then she wrote me back, and she said, oh, now a few of my colleagues say they're going to join us. There'll be like 30 doctors. And I said, okay, fine. And then she wrote me again, and she says, well, now the entire department, it's going to be 70 doctors in the UVA OBGYN department. And I was like, okay. So I kind of thought, like, this will be good. I'll be listening, et cetera. But I underestimated how intimidating it would be. It was really intimidating, y'all, to have 70 OBGYNs who had read my book are like, what do you mean Depo-Provera is bad? We love that drug, And so my husband had given me advice before it. He said, he's a lawyer. He's like, well, one of the rules when lawyers are interrogating experts is to just stick to what you know and, don't go into what they know, right? So that was what I tried to do, y'all. I just stuck with what I knew so that I wouldn't get, embarrassed. But I will say that, I'm hopeful that the medical community is reckoning with this history, and also just acknowledging, and I don't know if there are any doctors in the house, don't tell me if you're a doctor, I'll get nervous, that they are understanding the source of medical mistrust and the source of, why, we have have these disproportionate statistics, like, Black women's disproportionate maternal mortality rate, which is like 3 or 4 times that of white women. Infant mort, and it's across socioeconomic lines. Like a Black woman with a PhD is more likely to die of pregnancy-related complications than a white woman with an 8th grade education. Those kinds of statistics. And so, the medical community, I want them to know. And it was amazing how many of them said they had not heard about this case. And there is a consent form that they were talking about when I came on, and I can talk more about it in the signing line, but that they all have to do, and they were sort of complaining about it, and then I had to come in and say, well, this is why that consent form is what it is, don't shoot me, I'm just hopeful about like the medical profession recognizing there's a history here.
Who's up? Yeah.
This is a question for both of you. Who are your favorite characters to write in each of your books?
I think in Parrish, Grandma was my favorite character because she was she's so complicated, she's so complex, and the fate of the family rests on like her original decision, and it really wasn't much of a decision, and I feel like she did the best that she could, which, reading it, or she can be judged. It was a really poor effort, but I think that it was the best that I really connected with her character the most. She was my favorite character, and she was just so raw in a way that she would say what she wanted to and do what she wanted to do. She wanted to be free in a way that her mouth would do what she wanted it to do, her fists would, and her guns too. So I really loved Helen Jean.
I love grandmas too. Grandmas. I think for me, Sybil, my main character. I guess if you ask me who other than my main character, I would say the grandmother. Yeah, Mrs. Williams. She's just great.
Who else? We got one. Okay, you all fight over it. I think she's got it.
So as politicians want to make decisions about women's health and ability to choose or not choose to have a pregnancy continue, I just keep thinking back to the story of things coming around. And I turned 60 this year, and it was a big deal to me to think that we were fighting the same battle yet again. So I guess the question is about healthcare and women's choices, and how do you see that wrap into next projects or as you continue on?
Oh, Lord. Okay, well, I think that when the book came out, I'm going to answer the question through the book. I thought, I had no idea it would come out 2 months before Roe v. Wade was overturned. I always tell people when I started writing this book, it was 7 years ago, it was 3 Supreme Court justices ago. Activists in the reproductive rights community have been ringing the alarm that this was possibly coming, but like a lot of you, I was in denial. I was in denial up until 2 days before, and somebody texted me and said the decision is coming on Friday. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the book will be something to sort of remind us of the most vulnerable people who are affected by this. Black women, poor women, disabled women, women without resources. So I thought, okay, so, I put the call out. If any book clubs want to talk about it, let's talk about it. And I was inundated with Zoom requests. And what I found was that it was less about what I thought we were going to be talking about and more about women processing the ramifications of this decision for them, right? Because most of the women I was talking to on those Zoom calls were women with resources, women who have the resources to cross state lines and do whatever. And so we were talking about reproductive justice, which is a term coined by Black feminists in 1994 at a conference in Illinois, which encompasses so much more than the decision to terminate a pregnancy, right? It also encompasses the right to raise a child in a safe and healthy environment. It encompasses the right to, gynecological care, the right to just, maybe you don't want to have children. That's okay too. Some women don't want to be mothers and they shouldn't be stigmatized for that. So we were talking about also like what it would mean for women to be criminalized, and a lot of women were talking about miscarriages that they'd had and what it might mean if you were in a state where your doctor is required by law to ask a series of questions if you've had a miscarriage and you have to go in for a D&C, right? So how did you fall down those stairs, right? How did you lose this baby? Those kinds of things that would come at a time when a woman is really very sad. So it has been really enlightening for me to talk to women really all over the country all summer, and everybody's just been so thoughtful, and it has been very civil, and I have not received not one nasty email, not one. And I have been talking to what my mother would call mixed company, if you know what I mean. I might be talking to mixed company right now, you never know. But it has been really, when you are in a room full of women, particularly women readers like this, it's just been really respectful and civil and thoughtful, and it's really given me hope that this conversation is just beginning and will continue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think everything
Your
that I
character terminates a
agree,
pregnancy.
she attempts to, and that the historical thread it was something that I added probably, I had 11 drafts of the book, and it was probably in the 5th draft, because when I went through and read it, I was like, Helen Jean just didn't need these kids. She just didn't need to have children. And she had children, and once they're here, you can't go back and say, this person shouldn't have, they're here already. So she tried to make a choice, and that was taken away from her. Not Roe v. Wade wasn't an issue for her, but it was the community that acted as the voice of God for her. And she went ahead and had this child that she knew she couldn't love, and she knew that she couldn't mother, and it kind of made her bitter toward motherhood, and it affected her family. So I didn't know that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned when I started writing the book, making this into a novel, turning this story into a novel. And so it wasn't published that Friday when it was announced, but reviews were out. So the book was out for reviews, and the reviews all came back kind of making mention of that part, that chapter, which it's a very important chapter because it determines the shape of this family, what happens with this family. And I agree, I haven't had any, I've received no negativity. It's all been very good conversation, very productive conversation, meaningful and hopeful. And I feel good about that. I was a kind of a dark day. And I agree that a lot of people in the beginning wanted to process they were still processing what it meant for them, but to step back and look at it as this thing that Helen Jean was doing, this very dangerous thing. Like, we were able to talk about all of these other kind of, what do they call them, back alley? I called them outhouse in the book, these outhouse methods that are very dangerous. And we're looking at that again. Like, that's an issue again. So it goes back to that, things coming back around. And I think that is the part that really spoke or speaks to people. And it's important, and I'm encouraged by the conversations that have come out of it.
I hate the word timely, but I'm really glad your books came out this year. Yeah, and that's all the time we have. I wish we could talk much more, but thank you both so much. Thank you for your questions. Please come join us down at the signing colonnade tent. We're headed that way now, and they'll be signing their books. Thank you all.